Hello and welcome back to the channel. In my last wrap-up, you might recall me mentioning that I had just started The Running Man by Stephen King, although it was published as by Richard Bachman, King's pseudonym at the time, ahead of the new movie due out in November starring Spy Kids 3D Game Over's Glenn Powell. At the time of that recording, I had only read about 3 pages, but now that I've read all of them, and I just have one question. Guys, is Stephen King a bad writer? Now, I know he has his fans. In fact, I consider myself one of them. I loved both Carrie and 11/22/63, warts and all, but I haven't had such a viscerally angry reaction to a book I've read in a really long time. If you're only familiar with this new iteration of my videos that I've been doing for the past year, I used to deliberately read books that pissed me off because that was the style at the time. But I stopped doing it because I don't like it when reading feels like a chore. Oh, but this one. By the time I realized I hated it, I was in too deep, and I had to see it through to the end. Let's run through the plot. In the far-off future year of 2025. Anyway, in 2025, Ben Richards is a poor, unemployed man living in the slums with a wife, forced into prostitution to make ends meet, and a daughter sick with pneumonia in desperate need of medicine that they can't afford. Wait a minute, rampant unemployment, people forced into sex work to survive, and lack of access to healthcare? Okay, I still think he's a bad writer, but he was bang on target for what 2025 would be like. To make money for his family, Richard signs up to be a contestant for The Network, the evil regime who runs everything in the world and produces exploitative game shows to keep the masses in line. Based on his personality test and physical, they cast him on The Running Man.
He said it! He said it!
A televised game show, although King has it air on Freevee, beamed into all homes, where the purpose of the game is to not get caught while being chased by a team of trained killers called the Hunters. The longer he survives, the more money he makes for his family. But it won't be easy, because this game is interactive. Any member of the public can rat him out for their own chunk of prize money. Richards is... well, how do I put that delicately?
He's an asshole.
Racist, homophobic, misogynistic, and he lashes out at everyone he meets, spouting awful things. And I suppose that maybe you can argue that he's a man so beaten down by society at the end of his rope that it would be a natural response to turn into a monster. But I feel the need to share my personal philosophy with the class. In the face of even the worst circumstances, you always have a choice. Always have the ability to choose to be kind. So right off the bat, I'm having a lot of trouble liking the main character and having any stakes in him succeeding. Like, even the sick daughter and wife don't really give me any sympathy for this jackass. Back into it, he meets with the show's producer, Killian, who explains the premise and what he can expect, and then offers him a prostitute, but Richards declines, saying that he's married.
I'm married!
Ah, great. The only redeeming quality of this douche is his adherence to fidelity. His first stop after the games begin is to an old acquaintance to get disguises and falsified papers to allow him to move around more easily. But there's a catch. Richards has to submit 2 tapes a day from a personal recording device they give him, and while they claim that the Hunters won't know where the tapes are coming from, Richards has his doubts about it. He first escapes to New York, then to Boston. Thinking that they're about to close in on him, he sets off an explosion and kills several police officers before escaping to the Boston slums. There he meets a 7-year-old boy named Stacy, who brings him to meet with his older brother Bradley, a gang member who, when their sister Cassie got sick, started doing research at the library and discovered that lung cancer and asthma is up due to the unregulated pollution in the air and the fix being expensive air filters that obviously the poor like them have no way of ever getting. So the Freevee is an opiate of the masses to keep them from figuring out that they're being killed by the same people producing such quality programs as Fun Run, Dig Your Own Grave, and Treadmill to Bucks. Honestly, I prefer ow my balls myself, but to each their own. This knowledge galvanizes Richards into becoming an activist, using his 2 tapes a day to bring attention to the plight of the poor. But of course the network dubs over his messages using synthesized voiceover. That makes him out to be a monster, a villain to be hated by the viewers. Not super hard to do that, given his behavior up to this point. We also learn that Stacy and Bradley's last name is Throckmorton. Hey, I have a cousin Throckmorton. He skateboards. With a new goal in mind and a new ally in Bradley, Richards continues his escape using Bradley's help to get to Manchester, Bradley shedding his gang member persona to throw the cops off their scent, using a borrowed suit to pretend to be a representative of Raygon Chemicals, clearly a subsidiary of Vandalay Industries. And this actually brings me to the main thesis of this video, or at least the main reason that I felt so strongly about disliking the book outside of its entirely unsympathetic main character and the choppy chapters, making the book a confusing muddle, among others I'll get to later. I'm not really sure how to phrase this, but is Stephen King racist? Because he has this predilection for writing black characters who talk in what I imagine King thinks AAVE is, and minstrel show dialogue. There's also the magical black person thing that he's known for, where a black side character exists for the purposes of developing a white character's story, and occasionally they have actual magical powers. Bradley definitely qualifies, as it's him who galvanizes Richards into a crusader for the people once he learns about pollution. Not to mention how the characters throw the N-word around way too casually. And not just the black characters, where it's a little hard to read given that a white guy wrote it, but the one who throws it around the most is probably Richards. Like, it feels like that one scene from the Boondocks that I'm probably not allowed to play because YouTube would restrict the video. I've actually been really conflicted about what to do with this. I'm not sure I'm the best voice to chime in on the subject, but I feel like I can't critique the other parts of the book that I dislike for other reasons without talking about the racism stuff. I did some independent research on the topic, and what I learned is that people get really sensitive when you bring this up, decrying censorship and cancel culture, and, well, he's just from another era, and he writes people how they talk in real life. I know people who talk like that. And again, maybe I'm not qualified to talk about this, but I found 2 essays by Scott Woods, a writer and self-proclaimed Stephen King fan, who has read way more King than I have, that discuss Stephen King and his complicated relationship with race, particularly African Americans. The general thesis of those being, Stephen King has major blind spots when it comes to race. Woods saying at the end of his piece, the problem is that he doesn't have any black friends to tell him how enormous his blind spots are. And so maybe that's it. Stephen King has no insight into the experiences of those different than himself, and it's reflected in the text. Doesn't make the book any better, and definitely doesn't in any way excuse the racist elements present in the book and many of his other works. Anyway, off the soapbox, back to the review. So he escapes in a new disguise as a blind priest with a set of labels from Bradley that allow him to mail his tapes to Boston, where they will then be dispatched to the network, meaning that they can't track his postmarks anymore. But even that doesn't last very long as he sheds it in order to hide out with a friend of Bradley's. Unfortunately, the friend, Elton Parakis, isn't home, but his mother is. Mrs. Parakis is a raving racist who doesn't like her son's subversive acts and so calls the police to turn Richards in. Elton, to his credit, is a good person and takes Richards as far as he can before getting mortally wounded, then driving in the opposite direction to throw the hunters off Richards' scent. Eventually, he ends up near Derry, Maine, because this is a Stephen King book, and all roads lead to Maine, and after sending a kid to the mailbox with his tapes, he takes a woman named Amelia Williams hostage, which is a huge problem. Want to see what her husband did to the last people who took her hostage?
Where is my wife? Would you like me to repeat the question?
By this point, people are aware of what's going on, despite the network's efforts to make Richards out to be the villain, and he calls in the press to encourage the network and law enforcement to allow him safe passage, because they'd probably just kill Amelia and him without worrying. They can edit the video for the show, but reporters and amateur photographers and the like are another story. That narrative isn't so easily controlled. Eventually, he ends up on a plane with a flight crew, Amelia, and the leader of the hunters, Evan McCone, by threatening to blow everyone to Kingdom Come with an explosive, which is a bluff, and the supposed explosive is actually Amelia's purse. Although I've seen some messy purses in my day, there's a chance that she actually might have some in there. You never know, it might be next to the melted Lutens and her 2024 agenda book. Once they're in the air, Killian gets in touch and tells Richards that he knew he was bluffing as soon as he got on the plane because there are sensors to detect explosives. Which means King also predicted post-9/11 air travel. Actually, speaking of predictions that are right, a character mentions that polio made a comeback in 2005, so he was only off by about 20 years. Killian offers to have Richards join the Hunters and replace McCone, since he's long since beaten the record for contestants on The Running Man, and clearly has the skills. The hunted becoming the hunter, to McCone's anger and chagrin. Richards considers it, but knows he can't have a family. They'd be targets. And he did this for his wife and daughter. Unfortunately, Killian also delivers some bad news. Richard's wife and daughter were murdered days ago, not by the network, probably by one of his wife's clients. Or so Killian claims, so he has nothing left to live for. He tells Killian to fuck off and kills the entire flight crew and McCone after hearing about the autopilot, but is mortally wounded in the scuffle. He sends Amelia back down to the ground in the only parachute and sets course for the network building, crashing straight into Killian's office as the novel very abruptly, but mercifully, ends. So I know the whole recap review has kind of gone out of fashion. People don't want spoilers, but I spoiled it because you need to know what I'm talking about. You require context, which, yeah, you could get from reading the book, but I don't think you should read the book. It fucking sucks. Richards is a mean-spirited, bigoted monster who doesn't deserve sympathy in the slightest. Most of the characters aren't likable, even the ones who help Richards. Stacey Bradley and their family and Elton Parakis are about the only ones who show any likable qualities, and if the book was about them, then maybe I'd care about the outcome. Actually, I don't want that, because I don't even want to imagine how King would have written that, but you get what I mean. Not to mention that if I thought King had a racism issue, he also has a sexism issue too, because all his women are written poorly. They're either prostitutes, like Richard's wife and the women who work for the network, and being a prostitute isn't a bad thing. I'm sex-positive and pro-sex worker, but it's like a Frank Miller comic, for Christ's sakes. Racists, like Elton Parakis' mother, are walking stereotypes like Bradley's mother and Amelia, who Richards refers to several times as a hysterical woman. And I mentioned the choppy chapters before, but it's really hard to follow. Events jump around between chapters, the time scale is hard to follow, and a lot of the chapters are filler, detailing plot points that are dropped. Richards' crusade against the network because of the air filters is pretty much dropped right after he takes Amelia hostage, and his mental state is all over the place. He'll spend a chapter entirely delusional, and then he's normal in the next one, and I don't know what King, or should I say Bachman in this case, was trying to say. And this might not surprise you, but not only was this written pre-Carrie, but it was also written within a week, and it fucking shows. King states in On Writing that The Running Man was written in a single week, compared to his usual output that he once related to George R.R. Martin at a talk in 2016.
The way that I work, I try to get out there and I try to get 6 pages a day. So with a book like End of Watch, and I work, when I'm working, I work every day, 3-4 hours, and I try to get those 6 pages and I try to get them fairly clean. So if the manuscript is, let's say, 360 pages long, that's basically 2 months' work.
And as for the quality, King also had this to say in The Importance of Being Bachman, the introduction to the omnibus collecting all 4 of Richard Bachman's books up to that point, that it was
written by a young man who was angry, energetic, and deeply in love with the art and craft of writing. In a Bachman state of mind, low rage, sexual frustration, crazy good humor, and simmering despair.
I disagree with the crazy good humor, by the way. I didn't laugh once, but I was frustrated, enraged, and despairing, so 3 out of 4 ain't bad, Stevie. Or should I refer to him as Bachman here so I can call him Dick? The fact that it's an older pre-Carrie story released later makes sense because this is uneven, seems unedited, just a stream of consciousness of nonsense and half-baked ideas. Throw in the short cooking time and I'd usually be a little more forgiving, but King gave me no reason to pull my punches. And there's the bones of a good story in here. Fighting against a fascist regime. Richard refuses to play their games the entire time. That's why they want him. It's good entertainment, and they can use the fact that he's a shithead to their advantage because the audiences would have cheered for his death even before all the subversive stuff. The moral is do not submit to fascism. Do not comply. Always fight back. But it is such a slipshod mess that the message is really hard to parse. The ending was great. Richard releases his hostage and kills the guy responsible for putting him in that mess, along with everybody else at the network that was in the building. That's what you want from a story like this. In any other book, it would be a triumphant moment of catharsis. The hero died in a blaze of glory. I just hated Richard so much as a character and disliked the writing so much that I didn't even care by that point. Not to mention the nitpicking I could do. There's a line early on in the book when Richard's getting the false documents from this black market dealer named Molly near his town who comments,
I remember when Mick Jagger was a big name. You don't even know who he was, do ya?
Richard responds that he does know him, but then says,
He was a drummer with that English group, the Beatles, Mick McCartney.
Now, maybe this was a joke on King's part, but it's incongruent to me with a later line when Richards knows he's going to die and recites a movie quote about death.
Is this the end of Rico?
From 1931's Little Caesar. Not that one, the Edward G. Robinson movie, but that movie is 90 years old. Has Richards even seen that movie? Maybe I'd buy it if he showed any interest in old movies, but he didn't know who Mick Jagger was, so I doubt he does. Don't get me wrong, that is by far the least egregious issue I have with the book, but it's just another one on the very, very long list I have of reasons I hate this piece of garbage. I need you folks to understand how bad a book has to be for me to give it 1 star. 1. Frankly, I'd award it no points, but I feel like I gotta hand it to him for a somewhat accurate prediction of 2025. But that's about the only thing I actually found interesting about the book. It is without a doubt the worst book I've read this year, possibly in my entire life. If you made it through the entire video without turning it off, you either agree with me, or you just like hearing me shout about books. If you do, you should subscribe. I try to do videos every few months, and you'd probably like some of them. I don't take requests, but let me know if you felt I was too hard on it, or maybe not hard enough on this book, in the comments. See you next time. A gang member who, when their sister Cassie got sick, started doing research at the library and discovered that lung cancer and asthma is up due to... Okay, this has to go a little bit faster. We are going to take it from... Yeah, we'll take it from... has his doubts. Hey, I have a cousin, Throckmorton. He skateboards. With a goal in mind and a new ally in Bradley, Richards continues in his escape, using Bradley's help to get to Manchester. Bradley shedding his gang member persona to throw the cops off their scent, pretending to be a representative of Raygon Chemicals. Clearly subsidiary. Fuck. Hey, I have a cousin, Throckmorton. He skateboards. With a goal in mind and a new... Well, I'm gonna... Bradley defines...
Written by a young man who is angry, energetic, and deeply in love with the art and craft of writing, in a Bachman state of mind, low rage, sexual frustration, crazy good humor, and simmering despair.
By this point, people are aware of what's going on, even despite the networks attempting to stop people from seeing what's going... No. The way that I work, I try to get 6 pages a day, so with a book like End of Watch, I work every day, 3 to 4 hours, try to get those 6 pages. Manuscript is 360 pages long, that's basically 2 months' work. Written by a young man who was angry, energetic, and deeply infatuated with the art and craft of writing. In a Bachman state of mind, low rage, sexual frustration, crazy good humor, and simmering despair. My god, can this be the end of Rico?
Alright, this is Emily trying to do Daniel Day-Lewis as Stephen King, I guess. Written by a young man who was angry, energetic, and deeply in love with the art and craft of writing. In a Bachman state of mind. Low rage, sexual frustration, crazy good humor, and simmering despair. Wasn't at all Daniel Day-Lewis. Sorry, but I'll send you this one anyway.